Ritch Winter, of course, a longtime player agent, joins us. Rich, my man, how you doing?
I'm doing quite well. 82 degrees here. Enjoying myself. It's great.
All right. Well, you turn your camera on as we get to.
That would be very helpful.
That would be helpful. It's the best you've ever looked, Rich. It's the best you've ever looked right now.
But it doesn't say I can do that.
Oh,
there it is. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there you go. You'll figure it out. Also, though, today on the business of sports, and we've teased this a little bit. Many of you listening have heard about mental toughness, and that's definitely a thing. We're not going to try to sit here and say the mental toughness isn't a thing. However, like anything in the world, we're always looking for new opportunities and learning new things. And mental fitness is something emotional fitness. Our next guest, Janice Taylor, she had a fantastic project on this, and I know with Wilson 4Q, they've teamed up with some professional athletes, because a lot of athletes now, like, they know how to maximize their physical, whether it's strength, endurance, cardio, quick, all that stuff. You can get bigger, stronger, faster. But what about being more emotionally regulated? And that's what we're going to get into today. Janice, welcome to the show. Very much happy that you gave us some time today. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm so good. Thank you for having me. It's quite exciting. Rich is still figuring out how to get his camera on.
Well, no, I did, but it says I'm in the show. Everyone can see and hear me. So there it is. Hold on. I think that technology has now
catching up.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, we can hear Rich, so that's all good. This is the best he's ever looked, though, Janice. The best he's ever looked. I do. So for our audience, give me a little bit of your background for our audience before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts.
Okay, well, I'm excited to be here because I am from the prairies. I'm from Saskatchewan. I'm a prairie girl born and raised, and I had exposure very young, long story short, wanted to find a different solution than everything being about therapy, mental health. Something's wrong with you. This is your fate. I thought I just kind of disagreed. And so I went on a journey to kind of figure that out through psychology, and had started to write a theory on emotional fitness, which I think has taken me now 30 years. And through that whole journey, it's led me to Harvard University, from a kid from the poor neighborhood in Regina with just a single mom to there. So it's kind of been a journey to put this all together and test and learn. But we're so excited now, and guys like Rich, who have come forward to really get behind it early, have been huge for us. So yeah, we're the very first company in the world to not only be giving language and understanding and science to emotional fitness, we've also made a small language AI technology for it on the good side. And we're really the first group to kind of pioneer this with athletes as well. So it's been huge.
Okay, awesome. So obviously you have a Harvard degree, you studied it, and I love this topic because, like emotional fitness. I guess, first of all, how would you define emotional fitness?
Amazing question. So emotional fitness is 4-quadrant health: physical, mental, and emotional. But everything starts in the emotion before it goes to your head. So you need to think about emotional fitness as the basement to yourself. It's like the foundation. Everything starts there, and then it travels up to your head. So it's its own system, no different than your heart and your lungs. They're in the same body, but the brain and the heart operate differently, but they communicate. So you need to think about emotional fitness and the emotional system as its own container, but it's the first thing that happens in a human body when you make any decision about anything. It starts in your emotional system, and then it travels to the other quadrants of the self. So you can think of it like your inner sonar system, or your radar, or your wiring. It gets the signal before the rest of you does.
Okay. So, and that's where, and I think in a lot of cases, especially in sports, right? Like you got to make quick decisions. There's lots of pressure. There's lots of stress. Sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision. But a lot of times, I think for athletes, and at a younger age and at any level, you get a little, your emotions take over, right? Yeah. And most of us are just like, well, just calm down. You just calm down. But if it was that easy, we'd all calm down.
Right.
So take me through that, Janice, and what you've learned in how just calm down really doesn't help that much.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you. It's like you read my theory, because you need to think about the emotional system, same mechanics as, say, your knee. If you had an Achilles injury, you wouldn't say, go run a marathon. You'd be like, no, you got an injury, heal it, fix it, rehab it, then you run the marathon. So you kind of need to think about the emotional system, how it has its own wiring. And that wiring is injured before your 10th birthday and stays injured in most people 40 to 60 years. So it's not optimized. So what you're asking people to do, work harder, be tougher, don't drink, don't smoke, don't have too much sex, whatever it may be. You're saying, why are you doing all these things that are sabotaging you? But actually your emotional system has a bum leg. And so if you think about it from a bum knee, you wouldn't put the same expectations. But what we discovered was we could narrow the emotional injury that is the same in everyone. Doesn't matter the human. And we figured out we could heal it. And we did that over 2,000 people to actually narrow it down. And so the emotional system can actually be optimized, which means it's not about toughness or just working harder or willpowering your way through life. It actually can optimize for beyond ceiling performance. So your performance is here. You probably have all your things that you do to ensure your performance can be here, except no one until Ritch. Ritch is the first, and his crew is the first that is really pioneering this to say we can optimize, not only heal the injury, now we can optimize the emotional system in real time every day. It's not something that's just out there that you don't understand.
Ritch, the good news is that you figured out your system over there. So
well, apparently it was your system, because I just turned it on and turned it off, and it worked. So it was like the Microsoft, the Microsoft employees that got out of the car, flat tire, they ran around the car twice, slammed the doors, and couldn't figure out why the tire wasn't fixed. But yeah, it worked. So no, and I find it's been interesting over the years. There's a couple of things that we're seeing at the NHL level now. One, we talked about it with stick calibration in earlier shows. It's all about reducing the delay, because on average, a high danger scoring chance in the NHL lasts about 3/4 of a second. So whether it's stick calibration, a little bit more control of your emotions so you can react more effectively and more quickly, it's really important. And I have this argument with guys all the time, because I remember Paul Coffey once said to somebody, what the average NHL player wants is to be left alone. They're happy. That's why they're average. They're happy to be there. Connor McDavid, you told him you could go to the moon and someone would work on your mental fitness and improve your game by 4.3%. He's calling Elon Musk. And so I've said to players all the time, the physical fitness issue is almost irrelevant once they reach the NHL level. They cannot go into the gym and improve 30%. And because everybody, compared to their competitor for the job that they're working to maintain or to earn, because everybody's working out. Now, some are a little lazy, but so you can leapfrog them a little bit. They're probably not competition, but you can improve your mental fitness by untold amounts and change your game. I've seen Dominik Hasek in tears, begging me to go home. He had so lost his confidence. He was an emotional basket case, a mental disaster. And I said, and I didn't know what I was doing back then. I didn't know Janice, didn't know what they were doing. I just said, I came up with an idea. Dom, I'm not getting you out of your deal to go home. You're the best goalie I've ever seen in my life. So I made a deal with him that I would get him traded, and if the trade didn't materialize into a satisfying situation for him, then I'd help him break his contract and get his deal, broken. He could go home. That gave him the peace of mind to know there was an end. But if Dominik Hasek can go to the American Hockey League, can't stop a beach ball, he's lost his mental focus to that extent. If that can happen to Dominik Hasek, just go look at the stats. Indianapolis 1 year, 2 years later, the Vezina Trophy. What happened? Circumstances around him got him settled. He got in the game, and Janice knows this better than I do. The mental fitness and the physical fitness to a degree tie together, because when you lose your confidence, you lose your posture. When you lose your posture, you let holes above you. And Dom's just like the best example. Or Marty Straka gets bought out. Look at the stats. Bought out Florida. And then
I think what you're saying about that too, Rich, is like it's such an important thing to understand. If you think about this kind of from an 80-20 rule, we used to think it's like 80% mental and 20% physical, right? Anything you did was this 80-20 rule, which is really what you're describing. We would actually say something even different than that. We would say it's 80% emotional and 20% physical and mental. Because people can mentally think their way through things. And we're not talking about thinking better. We're talking about the emotional system. And 80% of every decision that an athlete makes, a human makes, a person makes at any age, it begins in the emotional system first. So this is completely shattering how we think of the world, because we're literally breaking this down and saying it starts in the emotional system that's kind of junky and full of, for lack of a better term, stuff. And then it travels to all the other parts of the quadrants of the self. And so it's actually 80% emotional. So if you see athletes hitting peaks, you don't see that. Like, we were even able to test that we could extend careers 1, 2, in some cases 3 years by actually just working on emotional systems. And so that's a huge change for an athlete who thinks their career is quote unquote over and they're coming to the tail end. You can extend a career as well. So the data on it is really quite fascinating. And we're just talking emotional system now, not mental toughness, because they'll burn that out.
Janice, I'm convinced that Chris Chelios played to 48 because of his mind, not his body. Because I remember going to visit him in LA, where he has a summer home, and he couldn't have breakfast because he was training with TR. Then he couldn't have lunch because he was going paddle surfing on the water, which in the ocean's tough. And then he couldn't have an early dinner because he was going to the Toyota Center to skate with his kids. He was acting like a 12-year-old. And so he just never really got old between his ears, you know?
Yeah.
And
would someone say Patrick Waugh was the same? Because he played pretty late too, right, in his career? Like, wasn't he in his...
Maybe the most recent example is Patrick Kane, right? He's still playing.
Yeah, still playing. Jonathan Graves, he's back. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. He was the first one we ever cartooned. But, you know, I think also what's really interesting is I think Tom Brady is a really good example of emotional fitness, because he's emotionally very, very connected and talks about that a lot.
Janice Taylor joins us. So, Janice, when you mention the emotional system, so when you're looking to repair it or clean it out, per se, how do you start doing that?
So we first wrote a theory, and then we had to write a process. And you can kind of think of a process very much like a fitness plan. Hey, I want to run a marathon. Okay, you're going to start with 1 kilometer, then 2 kilometers, then long runs. And you can kind of think about it in the same way that you're building a program. So we built a program for someone to systematically follow that's very predictive. We made it fun and interesting. It includes immersive. So there's no couch sitting in what we do. Okay. In fact, we draw the line at therapy being for mental health and emotional fitness is for everyone. So that's how we differentiate from emotional fitness to mental health. Mental health is different, and it needs a very specific therapist for mental health. We're emotional fitness, so we look at it no different. If you hired a trainer and said, hey, I want to run a marathon, he's like, here's my program. So people follow that program. And then we started to build an architect, Wilson. And Wilson, yes, from the movie Castaway, because I said if everybody had a Wilson and a volleyball, we could survive a deserted island. So I said, well, let's make a small language model technology that can actually further break down some of that emotional conditioning and behavior conditioning that exists in digital. So for lack of a better term, we got to pull people out of the vortex so that they can actually rehab better in some ways, like you would getting training, and then you can actually go and live. So we needed to make an AI technology. And what Wilson does is it looks across all 4 quadrants of health in real time and real data sets, and it's titrating you daily. So that 5 extra minutes on Instagram that a lot of these players are doing, or those 10 extra minutes gaming, we can actually show in real time how that would show up in your emotional system and hinder your performance.
So, and I think that would be fascinating for the average person, right? Like athletes is one thing, but for the average person, especially for kids and people who, doom scrolling, all those sorts of things, they're watching shorts. Like I've seen all the studies and how kids are struggling to maintain their attention because they got to watch 30-second short, then another 30-second short, right? They can't sit and watch a movie anymore because it's like,
Yes.
oh my God, it's too long. I'm not stimulated.
Yes, I'm so happy you're saying that, Jason, because then guess what? They go to the family doctor and he says you got ADHD and he puts you on Ritalin.
Yes, it's terrible.
And it's terrible. And really what it is I realize, and this may sound too crazy, but I said, if this digital is heroin, I need to make digital methadone, is what I said. So I'm like, how do I make digital methadone? Because if this is as powerful as it is, telling kids to just get off the phone, telling adults, like if you go to a sports game and you look at the stands, who's on their phone? Like they're not even watching. Did you know like Netflix has to change how people are even paying attention? So it is a global problem. So I made Wilson to pull people out of the vortex, give them a little bit of the shot, but like the digital methadone, but slowly over time, you actually go back to what you really are built as. And you don't need drugs. You're not sick and you don't have a mental illness. Now, sometimes you do, but not in every case. And so what we're doing to kids and to people, I had this group of students that we looked at, young 18 to 24-year-old young men on a team. Almost all had a diagnosis of ADHD. Almost all were told that they had depression or anxiety. Almost all were smoking pot, watching porn. And so I said, okay, so we've given these kids this diagnosis. We've set them out into the world. They believe they now have ADHD or depression or anxiety. It's usually ADHD and anxiety. They're trying to find a way to feel good. So they're trying to calm down these young men. And when we put them through the emotional fitness program, they were my best group. My 18 to 24-year-old young men were my best ass group. And they soaked it up. And that's how I knew I had to get to Wilson faster, because I knew I needed more. They were like, yeah, because I built it with a gaming engine, so it spoke to their sensibilities, as well as also wasn't them sitting on the couch talking about their feelings. That's not what they need to do. They need to know that they're okay, that there's nothing wrong with them. But we've been telling these young men sorry, I could go on and on about this. We've been telling these young men and women, an entire generation, that they have something wrong with them. They have a mental illness. They need to be medicated. They need a diagnosis. They need a label to live in. And it's fucking them up. For lack of a better term, it's just, sorry, can I swear? Can I say that?
Preferably not. No.
Okay. So it's messing them up. And so now these kids, like by the time you've started to take all these drugs, it's like trying to get back to that true person and that true self. It's really difficult. And then they're spending 6.5 hours a day inside of digital. So that's a big wiring. So the thing about it is, I want to preface in saying there are cases of true ADHD where the chemicals in their brain are wired in such a way that they do need a medication.
Yes.
That is few and far between those kids that have been up all night, aren't eating well, aren't getting sleep, 6.5 hours on digital, expected to sit in a chair, pay attention to a teacher when they haven't slept. They're totally wired away from themselves. That's a different condition. And I think why we started with athletes, to come back to athletes, is we think they are great role models to have the conversation around emotional fitness. And that's why we call it emotional fitness. This isn't emotional mental health. This is fitness.
Yes.
And you can fix it, and you can train it, and you can optimize it. And so Rich put this in front of some young, athletes, and it's been so great, because the end of the day, I think it really leads to a different conversation. Like, we're always having a mental health conversation, and we need to not have a mental health conversation. That's happening, but there needs to be an emotional fitness category and conversation.
We're going to take a quick break because I want to continue on with you.
Sorry,
no. All good. It's all good, Janice. It's all good. We're got to go to break, and you can do 10 push-ups during the commercial break. It's fine. And then we'll be good. We'll return.
10 burpees. We want to see them on screen. We don't want to just believe they happen.
Exactly.
That's my punishment. My punishment is burpees for my F-bomb.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll find out some emotional fitness for you to go.
We got it. That's good.
When we return here on the Gregor Show, presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Fascinating conversation today with the founder of Wilson 4Q, as we are joined by, well, of course, Ritch Winter, and we have Janice Taylor with us here. If you're just joining us, it's a fantastic conversation, and I love, Janice, how you differentiated, emotional fitness to mental health. It's very different, two very different things. And if we want to call it mental fitness, we can. Emotional fitness, either one, but it's definitely different than mental health, and I think that's very important. And I kind of want to dig in a little bit because we've got a lot of questions, like for your study with people. Like, I look and I do believe this is something that, because let's be honest, athletes are a small percentage of society, right? We've got kids every day, and tech and phones are really doing long-term damage. Just on your phones too often, it's not good for our brain, right? Everything's quick. You need like a dopamine fix all the time. Yeah. So when you, let's say, I don't know, could you work like teenagers, right? Does it work like with teenagers? How would you start the process of repairing and helping out, their emotional fitness?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So the youngest student we ever had, or the youngest person we had in the 2,000 people was a girl who was 12. So that's been our youngest test subject out of the 2,000 people that went through it. It's the same process no matter who it is. There's slight variations with regards to it. And this is why I really had to build Wilson, because I knew that I could supercharge the results. What we were doing in old school analog, people going through the program and the process. Again, just like you'd see a fitness trainer, you're going to do legs one day, you're going to do arms another day. You need to think of it kind of the same immersive experiences that way. Is that we knew we needed the technology in order to pull people out, because people would do extremely well, but they get sucked back into the vortex. And that's what you're seeing, God bless all of the therapists out there, but like the hour every 2 weeks that they may see someone, the rest of those days, 6.5 hours a day is the average. Someone's inside of a behavior conditioning machine. It's kind of hard to penetrate that, even if the knowledge is good and even if they're getting good information, right? It's hard to penetrate that. And that's really, I've been in the tech industry. It's my 16th year. And the very first startup I did was across all the major sports leagues. I was across all 5. And we were looking at children in that environment, and we looked at language technology. And early on in my career, like 2013, 14, I started to ring the alarm bells. I was living in Silicon Valley, and I said, like, this, if this gets in the hands of kids, we're not going to be able to stop this freight train. Now, this was 12 years ago. And I was ringing the bell then, saying, like, this is going to change social emotional learning of children. You're going to have dysfunctional adults. You're going to have kids that aren't going to be able to launch into adulthood. You're going to have rampant sexual dysfunction, high suicide rates, cutting, image issues. I rang the bell in Washington, D.C., and in Ottawa with both governments, by the way. And I was like, and, people just were kind of like, no, it's going to be fine. It's just Facebook. It's just playfulness. And I was like, no. And so here we are now with the results of all of that. And now we're really able to see that the penetration is beyond even dopamine. If you think about the emotional system and what it needs to function, just no different. Again, if someone's put their hands around your neck, your breath changes, right? You can kind of think about your emotional system's been in a vice grip. And over time, it's been pushing on that emotional system with its inability to take a full breath. And so what we were able to look at is to say, how does technology make this injury worse? And we studied it the last decade, and it makes it profoundly worse.
Yeah.
Profoundly. If we didn't have devices, people would have a lot of that same internal muscle. We call it the muscle that you need in your emotional system, but that muscle's been atrophied.
Yes.
Because now if you think about that muscle, and Ritch mentioned, the ability to delay gratification, that's one of the injuries. Everything now is at our fingertips. We're at least of a generation that remember what it was like to be bored in a doctor's office or sitting at a plane. So we actually were doing a squat, for a lack of a better term. We had muscle where we learned in that muscle, in that boredom, to actually delay satisfying it. Now you have what we call digitally native kids. They don't know even after their first breath. Women who are breastfeeding are holding a phone. So you're already conditioning the baby to look at a device before it's actually a day or two old. Behavior conditioning starts then. They're on the device because they don't want to be bored while they're breastfeeding. So you'll see women doing this all the time now, which is a very different pathway. So you condition a baby. So what ends up happening is these babies end up being teenagers who have been raised entirely in an environment of digital.
Yeah. And so to start, because we've had a lot of texts, people wondering, like, how can the average person, how can we gain access to a lot of your studies, and how could we start repairing so they
can go to wilson4q.com. I started to train people, so I launched a school. We're looking for a lot of male coaches, by the way, as well, in our men's health division. Okay. So we believe emotional fitness in X. So we have emotional fitness for perimenopause, emotional fitness for teens. And so we have a school, and I've trained people on that. And they can actually start to already get the materials. There's a self-directed portal where they can get all the knowledge. They can do the process by themselves. We recommend a coach, but just for 6 months, that's it. That's all. Just like a fitness trainer. If you're just starting out, you get a fitness trainer. They teach you how to work out, and then you're on your own. Okay. So you can come there. They can check that out. And then once Wilson launches live, which we're launching it on in alignment with some of the athletes, then they're going to be able to do this on their own. And this is kind of a very profound shift. Is I believe that emotional fitness is for everyone, and they can do it. Little bit of a trainer, no different than you don't need a gym. You don't need a trainer to go to the gym all the time. And you don't need someone to train you after you know the theory to do this for yourself. It's extremely empowering and very, very centered within themselves. So there's 12 steps. Takes 6 months to heal the injury. That's it.
6 months.
That's it.
And how many hours a day? How much work is it per day? Like, because someone's like, hey, I got 3 kids, I'm at home. How much time do a day do I got?
It becomes an interwoven part of everything that you do during the day and is not extra. The only thing in the initial part of the training is you first learn the awareness. You start to change some habits just because instead of being on your phone, maybe you do actually read a book again. And I mentioned you about reading when you're on the plane. So we just start to change, but it's mostly what is really mostly missing in the world is an understanding of your emotional system separate to your mental system. And I jokingly say this because I'm like, you could stop at a gas station and ask the gas attendant and say, tell me what physical fitness is. And he'd be like, garbage in, garbage out, and you need to move. Like, he'd be able to tell you what physical fitness is from science. He doesn't need an advanced degree to do that. He'll know what that means. Our goal is for people to think of their emotional system in the exact same way that they do their physical system. So you need oxygen to breathe. You don't need to be a cardiologist to figure that out. And so if you kind of think about the emotional system, that's where we're starting. We have almost zero knowledge in our society of how our emotional system actually works. So that's the key part of it.
Rich?
Yeah, quick question, and I might lose you guys, but to everybody's benefit here shortly, because I didn't realize my battery was as low as it is physically and in my on my laptop. But I'd like maybe Janice to address in the next segment. Like, Kobe Bryant had a traumatic experience with the rape trial that he went through, and if you saw him coming out of those trial days, he was so angry at himself, and that's when he first started using music to set his emotional state before games. And I talk about this all the time. I've never he listened to the theme song from Friday the 13th. And be interesting to hear from Janice about, and I may not be here, but to hear about how music plays a role in all this. Because we all know when our favorite song comes on the radio, we're by ourselves and we're singing like idiots in the shower, but we don't know why that happened. And I think music plays a big role here, doesn't it?
Yes, well, all creativity does. So if you think about the way the brain is built, the prefrontal cortex is the front of your brain. It's how you make decisions. It's what you visually see. You can also imagine it like a brick wall that you ram your head through regularly. It's sort of like you kind of like ram. So when you think about your emotional system, on the temporal side of your lobe, parked beside your emotional system inside of your brain is your creative center. So you'll hear sometimes like, a lot of artists are left-handed. It's because they use the right side of their brain, which is actually where, the opposite is. A lot of people are right-handed, so you use the left side of your brain, which is where all your functioning, your brain is, where you're making judgments and decisions. So to bypass this machine in front of you, your prefrontal cortex that literally is ramming your head through the brick wall expecting a different result, music and art, film, creativity ignites the other centers of your brain, which actually calm and release hormones throughout your body that calm your nervous system so that you can be present in your body. But most people, if you think about, I'm from the prairies. If you said, hey, I'm going to be an artist and a painter, they'd be like, get a job, get your ass to school. That's
the second fine.
Yeah, we were all told that being creative wasn't what we did, but every human being is born with a creative center. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be a Picasso and you're going to paint. It means that you have to actively make a choice to engage it.
But Janice, I would disagree. Sorry to interrupt, but I would disagree with you because I took in one aspect. Mostly, I agree with you. But one aspect, I took a right brain drawing course from a woman at UCLA, and I was on the plane, and they said, if you can't teach you to draw like an accomplished artist in 3 days, you don't have to pay. I'm like, I'm going to be that guy because I couldn't even draw a stick man. And what they taught us to do is instead of drawing, because the left side of the brain draws what you think a chair looks like.
Yes.
The right side of the brain, if you train it, looks at what
That's
you see.
That's the operative word. Yes.
So the way they tricked us is they had us say in a chair, you draw the negative space. Don't draw the chair, draw the negative space, like the space between the bars on the back of the chair.
I love it.
Then what you learn is like, oh my gosh, the chair's there. And then the third day, I remember saying, like, they paired us up at the end, and I can't even draw a stick man. But if next time you guys see me, and I got my phone with me, you got to see what I drew on the third day, because it's all about retraining the brain. I never thought about that, but that was like,
that's exactly what she did. Is essentially when you activate the creative portions of your brain, it starts to activate your emotional system.
Does it have to tie in with like my high shits at my highs, like flow experience kind of as well?
It's not necessarily just that, but it has to be the part. So when you asked about Kobe Bryant and music, all he was doing was activating that side of his brain so that it could further calm him in a way. Now, when you have an emotional injury, the problem is that your prefrontal cortex, your brain, how you think, blocks, your defense mechanisms block access to your temporal lobe. So music is one way that is an easy, friendly way to activate this other part of who you are. But when you are trying to think you need to be mentally tough or think your way through a situation, you might as well take that prefrontal cortex and bang your head against the brick wall behind me, because all you're doing is activating the same system that is preventing you from getting to the actual emotional system. And that's was formed in children under the age of 10, your defense mechanisms, the wiring in your brain, how it protected you, your fight or flight. So when we come back to athletes and they feel danger, they think it's danger, it's just a feeling. So they're on the ice, they're doing what they're doing. They start to look for pattern recognitions of things before. Oh, I know how this plays out. This guy's going to do this. I'm going to do this. This is how this is. Now, when you're first training athletes, you want a lot of that repetitive memory, right? You want them to not have to think when they shoot the puck. It just should be automatic, right? We teach them to do things. It's like a tennis player, rote memory over and over again. What we don't realize is that because of that, we put them further in the box in their brain. So when they have a feeling, they're not able to distinguish whether this is good for them. So they can't embrace the feeling. All they know is danger, danger, danger. This doesn't fit in my box. And so why this is so imperative for every human being, but mostly, again, just because we're talking about sports today, is that they're only operating half speed. And I don't care if it's Connor McDavid or anybody else, and he's amazing. That emotional pieces of the puzzle will become an Achilles heel. They do show up.
Like, how much is his passion for winning a cup and his inability to get one so far hurting him. And I think the other thing that comes into play, tell me if I'm wrong, is men are told, you're a pussy, what you cry at movies, you get emotional. And so we hardwire in young men that being in touch with your emotions is not it's not appropriate.
We've defined that emotions involve crying. And we're not talking about actually defining the emotion. We're just talking about a feeling that could be good or bad. It's just a
right.
So if you take a Connor McDavid as an example, and I don't know the man from Adam, so it's not for me to say, but if you take this as an example, the way that he's wired his brain, he's wired it for that, right? For perfection, for winning a cup. That's what he's done to his brain. But you have to think about it. It will work for 90% of the time, but it reaches a ceiling. And so he has another reserve. Now, if I was an Oiler fan, I'd be like, Connor, you go get into that reserve of gold. You get your butt over there. Let's dig that up, because there's this well of gold that exists inside of him that will propel him beyond what he thinks he can reach in his maximum.
It's interesting you say that, because I don't know, Jason. I thought like in the last game against Florida last year, Connor was just burnt out. Like it just looked to me like he was tired. And I don't know whether that's emotional, physical, or some combination, but he
yeah.
80-20 rule.
Yeah, they all connect a little bit, do they not, though, Janice? Like a lot of players will talk about that. You become. Matthias Ekholm mentioned it the other day. He goes, you know what? You got a lot of games in a short period of time, and he goes, as much as you'd like, you can't get mentally because you got to play good defense. You need to. It's just hard work. A lot of it, it's way harder work than just figuring out a thing. Yeah. But there's a time where you're just like, okay, I'm emotionally spent. I can't convince myself. Like, I know that Michael Jordan, all of his we talked about is and he took that personally, right? Like he used anything to motivate him in a different way. Maybe it was negative at times, but he found something. Oh, this guy told me that I couldn't do this. Well, I'll show him, right? And he was wired that was his way to do it. So it's probably a little bit a way to tap into that reserve you talked about. Yeah. And he just maybe didn't do it in the way that we know, but there are ways that some people probably do it now without even knowing that they're tapping.
They don't even know that and it's interesting because you mentioned about beating your head against the wall. Like it will work for a long period of time. So like it's only becomes an Achilles heel. You kind of got to think of it like a drug that loses its effectiveness. If over time it stops working, that's what we know about any good drug. So like if you've beat yourself into submission to work harder than the next guy and it's worked for say 10 of your 15-year career, great. We're not talking about that. What we're saying is have that and this.
Yes.
So we think it's like, oh, you're trading one for the other, that you're not going to be mentally tough. And men think this more than women do, by the way. Men think, well, if I'm mentally tough, I can't be emotional. I can't have emotion too. I got to be this or that. So it's very black and white, which is how the functions of your brain are. But if you actually look at this is a pot of unlimited gold, because the emotional system, once you tap into it, you are 100% then optimized. And at times you're going to use the mental fitness, and at times you're going to push the gas on the emotional, but you'll be aware of what you're doing, which is a very big difference. Most things, like you just said, happen that you didn't know you were. But I equate it, when Jordan went to the rim and all of a sudden it looked like he took another step in the air. He went from here and you're like, that guy can't go higher. And then you watched him, he leaped another one. It was like he had an invisible staircase. That's emotional fitness. That invisible staircase in a human is what everybody has that they don't know they have, and they're not intentionally present using it. So what we're doing with the athletes and also with the world is starting at the bare bones, which is, this is how your emotional system works. This is the pot of gold you've not even spent yet. You're not even tapped into it in a minute. And then we're going to open up that reservoir of gold so that they can shoot and have that extra leap in the air.
So Janice, and I think Rich is, I think we're losing his sound. I think he's dying out there. But
sorry. I know. I just was saying, like, Michael Jordan. It's interesting that's Michael Jordan, because as crazy as Dennis Rodman was off of the court and the crazy life he lived, his emotional focus on the court was unbelievable. Like Jordan used to say, he's the player I trust the most. with the game. And it's interesting that maybe Dennis needed all that extracurricular activity to get in that state. I don't know.
Well, the other interesting thing about that sort of study from a psychology perspective is that Rodman also fully embraced the role that he was. He didn't fight the role he was. And so he didn't have a disconnection of his identity. He knew exactly who he was in those moments, and he was able to accept it. And that's why he was emotionally sound, because he wasn't he rebounded like better than anyone. He's like, I'm going to be the best damn rebounder in the world, and I'm going to make it an art form, in which he did make it an art form. And you talk to him, he was a tactician. He knew where it was going to go where for a rebound.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because he was
yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because he was like, he just had this incredible belief. And I think everybody that played against him knew, like Shaq will tell you, he's in the top 5-6 players in the game, because outside from Kobe, Jordan, I don't really put LeBron in that category, but at the end of the day, most of the great players who played against him will put Rodman in that the ability to control a game, because he was emotionally engaged beyond.
Yes.
Because I think
Rich, that's such a great example of that. And the architect of that was Jordan, because he understood the specific roles that needed as part of the whole puzzle piece for him to do what he needed to do. And I think that's what's missing sometimes in the game, is not looking at the whole puzzle pieces of each person playing that role and thriving in it, right? And knowing that that's the role they should be in.
Well, I think, and you think about, if anybody watched The Last Dance, they there's a spot in there where Dennis Rodman in his first season says to Phil Jackson, who embraced all of this stuff and embraced the love stuff we talked about in a previous podcast, he recognized everybody was different. So when Dennis said, I need a vacation in the middle of the season, like hockey coaches would blow a stack. They have no idea for the most part. And he said, well, Dennis, what do you need? And he talked about it. They communicated. He gave him 4 days off in the middle of the season to recharge. Yeah. Of course, Dennis took 7, and that's just Dennis. But when he came back, Janice, nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. Welcome back, Dennis.
Yeah. Because you know what's so interesting about this, and this is where I really like hoping that your podcast, this is the first podcast I've gone on, by the way. So thank you very much for this, because men, I think specifically in athletes, need to think about emotion not as sitting on a couch crying and talking about their feelings. That is not what this is. What this is understanding that it's a reservoir of strength and gold that they have outside of how they think that they've not utilized. That's what emotional fitness is. So if they want to tap in and go to that next level, that's what it is. Now, some, like Jordan, he had it in spades. You know, he had it in spades. I think Tom Brady had it in spades. Like, he brought Gronk with him to Tampa Bay because he knew that that was a puzzle piece that he needed. So, but you also know that he had someone behind and he got ribbed for it on his roast, that he had his person, Alex. But that was also a conduit where he understood his emotional strength with that. So you see some of the really, really great ones embrace that side of them and understand that really profoundly.
Janice Taylor joins us, and
Janice, and I just wanted to say this is a great segue to Calvin Pickard, because ultimately I think the Oilers made a terrible mistake. 9-2 in the playoffs, all of that. Last 3 games, .857 save percentage. But the fact that the first thing that happened minutes after Calvin cleared waivers was Draisaitl saying that this was the best teammate they ever had. I think they'll come to the realization, because I don't think the other goalies are that good. They're going to come to the realization, this emotional piece that Calvin Pickard provides, the emotion that drives those players to play better because they love him.
Yeah.
That's a piece that got them to the finals, got them where they are, and they're not getting there without him. And at some point, they'll wake up and figure that out. Yeah. And I'll look forward to it. I said, today, I'll see
you see the dynamic on the Maple Leafs right now, and I'm not going to pick on the Maple Leafs, but 99% of their problem, I'm going to go on the record to say this, is emotional toxicity.
Yeah.
So what's happening there amongst a group of young men who just don't have this mapping, right, is a lot of toxicity. And so when there's too much toxicity, there's not enough mental fitness in the world that actually does that. It erodes itself from the inside out. It's like a cancer. And so when you have too much emotional toxicity and not a balance with it, people get out of balance. And so Sometimes when administrations and GMs are making decisions looking at how does he play, what are his minutes, what's this and this, they're forgetting that every team needs an emotional center. I'll say this, an emotional center that actually balances out toxicity. And so I would say, like Jonathan Toews on the Blackhawks, when they went on that run, emotional center.
You're too close to Winnipeg. I disagree with you. That emotional center was a guy named Marian Hossa.
Oh, that was too. Okay, well, he was too, but I would say in that
No,
case,
he wasn't too, Janice. He was. They haven't won
he
a
was
cup.
that.
for
Okay,
50
fine.
they haven't won
I'll
a
say
cup for
because I love
50
Jonathan
years.
Toews. I'm sorry. I should
No,
have said
they haven't
Marian.
won a cup. Janice, they haven't won. This is my expertise. They haven't won a cup. They didn't win a cup for 50 years before he came. And you know what? They haven't made the playoffs.
Fair.
since-
I'll do a set of burpees for that.
You need multiple pieces to win a cup. I don't think there's just one.
No.
Lots of
But
different.
But there is that inflection. There is that inflection point. Like Toews, Kane, Keith, Seabrook. Oh my gosh!
But if Toews isn't there, does Hossa win without Toews? Probably not. That's my point. Like you
Probably
can't
not.
say that if one guy's if
No, but I'm just talking,
there-
Jason.
it's
He
not
was
about
the
the
emotional
skills.
piece. There's
It's
a
just
reason
emotion.
Quenneville. You know what, Janice? There's a reason Quenneville sat him beside Patrick Kane.
Okay, so I will give you
Quenneville's
that one,
not
but I
stupid.
will say it's not about skills or what they
No.
do in there. It's that emotional antenna, you know? It's that emotional center that brings that sort of to something like this. But I really hope that whether it's people listening, emotional fitness is completely attainable. You know, I equated.
How do you start it?
So there is a very simple thing. If you go to wilson4q.com, you can go and you can actually start just learning the theory of how your emotional system works. Like no different than you're like, how do I work out? It's no different. Like, what's the fitness? So I think theory is important. I think you need to understand how your emotional system works.
Yeah.
Once you understand how it works, then you can be like, okay, now I want to perfect it. And that's a very distinct process that we actually proved and modeled out so people could start doing that on their own.
Well, the key part when I read it before you came on, Janice, that really resonated me with number one was delayed gratification, because impulsivity, avoidance, difficulty tolerating discomfort, that we try to eliminate that in society, right? Like there's so many parents now, I see it where they're just like, they got to solve everything for their kid and because it's easier. And they think and you're basically like, and this is maybe a bad example. My wife took our 12-year-old son to get his hair cut. Now, guess what? He goes and talks to the hairdresser. Not her. It's not her head. It's not her hair. There was teenage boys, 15. The mother's up there telling her exactly how. So their son just sits there and it's like, what are you teaching your kid? You're teaching him that he's useless and he can't even talk about what type of haircut he wants. It's a very simple thing. But then the other thing was the empathy of the self, the disconnection from one's own needs and the relational conflict with others. That's what emotional fitness is on your way. And that really was something that got me thinking. And I enjoyed reading that on your site. It's something I never really, heard about or was presented in the way that it was. Today in the interview, but also online. And I think it's something on our show, we like to talk a lot of sports. We like to have a lot of fun, but I do think emotional and like mental health at times, this might come out wrong, but I got a little tired of hearing it all the time. Everything was mental health. And I love how you started this interview when you said everybody now has ADHD, right? Because, well, it's not that they have ADHD. It's because our whole society system is teaching you not to have any boredom, to always have to be engaged. And so it's not ADHD, but then you get them on drugs and now they're ruined. And
then they're on drugs and then they can't actually heal that ability to do it because it's numb. So thank you for saying that, because people think, well, what is empathy? It's not empathy of others. It's empathy of the self. And you think about empathy of the self and the ability to delay gratification are two wheels of the same car. If one goes flat, you don't drive as well. But they work together. And so why it's important and what we're denying each other from our society perspective is we're slapping a label on everything that we feel. We are trying to diagnose everything. We're trying to control everything. And at the same time, we're uncomfortable with people being uncomfortable. And it's not helping anyone. It's not helping anyone at all in any regard. We're over-diagnosing, over-explaining. We're not allowed to just have a feeling, period. We're like, why do you feel that way? Well, what is because of this? Oh, I don't feel comfortable with girls. Oh, you must have this. Hey, I don't feel comfortable with this. Oh, you may have this. I don't feel comfortable with this. You may have this. I can't sit still. You have ADHD. We are addicted to explaining things.
Yes.
It's interesting, Jason, just a point of you didn't know what we were going to do for an hour when we talked about love. The only 2 shows we've done in the last couple of years that we missed the second group of commercials, love and mental fitness or emotional fitness. So we got to do more of this because it's really important. Pornography thing's a big thing. We should even do a show on that. There's just a lot of stuff that young men need to hear more about because the impact on their lives is beyond anything they can imagine. And we may be a good place to start for that, because there's a lot we can do here.
You're a pioneer, Rich. You're a pioneer.
Janice.
Well, the simple answer, Jason, if an elite athlete wants to know about this, my number is call us. We're going to introduce them to Janice. Otherwise, your agent who's doing your deal, taking you for dinner and doing absolutely nothing about your career, probably not a great choice.
That's totally fair. Janice, thanks so much for coming on our radio show. We really appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch. Again, for people that are interested to learn more, I highly recommend it.
And I'm sorry I let it fly.
We do want a video of those burpees that Jason can post.
Push-up video for sure. Wilson, the letter 4Q.com, Wilson4Q.com, and we will be in touch, and we're definitely going to have to get you back on, Janice, down the road, because this is definitely a very important topic. Because sports, I love sports. All our listeners love sports, but sports is just one element of life, and I think most of us love life more than we love sports.
Well, and this is what drives sports, Jason, and that's why it's important.